Actually, before I get rolling into the story, I want to thank everyone for being here. I am on disability for PTSD and chronic depression. And usually when I have to tell a 10-minute story that's filled with PTSD triggers, I have to pay a psychiatrist to listen to me. So y'all paid to come here, oh my goodness. In Japanese, things are divided into koto and mono. And I think this is really important. I'll get back to it. Whew. There's been a lot of gun violence in my life. Mostly from the police, but also from strangers and even from friends. Handgun violence, mostly. When I was raising my son, who's now 19, but I'm talking about him when he was 5. When I was raising my son when he was 5, I further divided the mono, which is things, non-living things, all non-living things. And we talked about those things, and I further divided them into tools and toys. And I told him that everything could be divided into these categories. Toys, we pretty much knew what they were. Tools, I had a letterpress studio and a paper making studio. We kind of knew what those was. The one gray area was guns, toy guns, which of course when you're raising a 5-year-old boy are like everywhere in the culture and in the neighborhood. But I told my son, any gun, a water gun, anything, this kind of gun, it's a tool. It's not a toy, you don't play with it, you don't pretend with it in my house, period. And I think he understood that. But of course, there's complications there. I'm stuck on the, there it is. All right. Yeah, toys and tools. So, back when I was a teenager and living in the Bay Area, I had a lot of problems with, well, a lot. Hit and run with the police. I used to do a lot of graffiti, a lot of anti-war, anti-government graffiti. Sometimes it went really smoothly. I was out there like every other night, and sometimes not so smoothly. One day I was being chased on foot by a cop who, I imagine his legs were really, really long, because I was fast, and he started about a block behind me, and I could hear him gaining on me by his footsteps. You know, I'm wearing like running sneakers, and he's wearing like cop shoes. And I thought, I gotta move fast. So I ducked into an alleyway where I knew there was a 3-story straight up fire ladder, and I could get to the rooftops and cut across a lot of the city. So I'd made that turn. I started climbing like a spider monkey up that ladder, and I heard him running, and then I heard him stop, and I thought, okay, keep climbing, keep climbing, keep climbing, and then I heard that unsnap of the holster, and combined with the stopping, and I kept climbing and climbing and climbing. Then the shout, stop or I'll shoot. And I just kept climbing faster. And he never let off the shot. I made it to the rooftops, and I made it across all those buildings, and I escaped into the night. But back to my son. He was a really smart 5-year-old, and he told me, well, look, you let me use other tools in the house that are dangerous. And it was true. I was studying martial arts. We practiced with bamboo swords. Under my supervision, he used a kitchen knife to cut carrots. He used a paper cutter in my studio under supervision. And this gray area was about to make me a hypocrite. And in my book, being a hypocrite is worse than being a killer. And I was trying to figure out, well, what the hell do I do with this? So I told him, okay, here's what we do. We'll buy you a gun. It'll be the same gun that I have. I had a Glock 17. I didn't usually wear. And of course, it's not going to shoot real metal bullets. And you can't use it as a toy. You can't take it to a friend's house. You can't run around the yard with it, period. What we will do is we can shoot target practice together. And because it's a tool, and like you said, we do sometimes learn to use dangerous tools. So we did that. He had a little, and it shot a little paint bullet that someone had mentioned before. But for all practical purposes, it actually did act like a Glock 17. And he became a pretty good shot. And I thought, how am I raising a killer? You know, I didn't think so. About that time, I was one of the few parents. It's funny, when you pick your kid up from school, most of the parents stay in their cars and leave their car engines running in the fumes and everything, but I was the one weird parent that actually got out of the car, sat on campus. My son went to Holloway Elementary in Ampi School District here, and I'd sit under a tree and I'd read. And I have never dressed according to gender. It's not something that I've ever taken into consideration. And at that time, I was also known as a children's author. And so all the kids knew me. My books were in the library. I read to their class, and most of the kids really loved me. And the problem was, of course, the parents, who had all kinds of prejudices about everything under the sun. And I'd gotten some verbal threats, nothing too serious over the first, 5 months of school or something like that. But for whatever reason, it started to escalate. And after school let out, people would come up to me and say, you can't be on campus. We're going to shoot you. And I would get, at one point I was getting 7 to 12 death threats a day on the phone. And they basically all were like, we know where you live, faggot. We're going to find you. We're going to string you up. We're going to kill you. And my response to this was to carry my Glock 17 openly. And also to arrange for my son to stay with his mom until whatever this was going to blow over. In about 2 weeks, the threats stopped. I always think about it now, like, you don't like the way I dress? How do you feel about my sidearm? And the sidearm worked. It really did. So, my son came back to school. Everything seemed fine. And, he became a pretty good shot and kept all the rules. Some months after that, while my son was at his mom's house on the weekend, I held a big party at my house, which was not that uncommon. This was like a complete rager, as they say, ended around 3:30 in the morning. And so about 3:30, I stay sober during my parties because they're at my house and I bounce them, so I have to be sober. So about 3:30 in the morning, I'm making the rounds in the house, make sure no one's passed out in the corner, or vomiting in the bathtub, or making out in the bed, or whatever it is that you look for at that time, right? And my house was really quiet and clean. And so it was cool, And I had a backyard, and I slid open the glass door to go to the backyard. And on the couch on my porch was the woman who lived with me, completely and utterly passed out. Not asleep, but possibly maybe even OD'd. And a stranger on top of her, pulling her pants off. And they didn't notice me. Well, the stranger's back was to me, but he didn't realize I was 3 feet behind him. And I just took in what was happening, and then went back into the house. And I got my Glock, I loaded it, and I came back outside, and they still hadn't noticed me until I put the gun up and I pulled the slide back to move the bullet into the chamber. That caught his attention. And he turned back, and you could see a lot of fear and confusion in his eyes. And I said, what's happening here, it doesn't look consensual to me. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 40 seconds. I'm going back in the house for 40 seconds, and then I'm going to come back out here. And if this is still going on, I'm going to react to it. And I went back in the house, and I sat at my typewriter, and I put my pocket watch on the table and watched the second hand. And I thought about all the rules I taught my son. And one of the rules was if there's anything near or behind your target, if it's alive, if it's a grasshopper, a tree, a cockroach, a squirrel, anything, you do not fire your weapon. Every life has value, you value it, you're responsible for anything that that one bullet destroys. And here I was, with a rapist with my roommate directly under him in line of target. I solved the problem with special ammunition, and I double-checked the ammunition. And as I watched the seconds tick by, I thought, in about 3 minutes, your whole life is going to change no matter what happens. I thought about all those rules, and then I slid the door back open, and my roommate was still very much passed out on the couch, her pants and panties at her ankles, and the rapist was standing about 3 feet away from her, fully dressed, and standing completely still. And I had my Glock in my hand, and I had it pointed at the ground. I used to also tell my son, never, ever point a gun at any living thing unless you intend to kill it. It's not a tool like that is not a threat. It is a tool to be used to kill people and nothing else. So when I went back outside, like I said, the pistol was aimed at the ground. Then I looked at him and I said, "You made the right decision." And there was a lot of silence. And he just kind of stood there. And then I said, "You need a lift home, don't you?" And he nodded, yes. And I went back inside, and I put my pistol away. And I calmly gave him a ride, at least to where he said he lived. When I came back, my roommate was still passed out. But I thought, well, things are a little calmer now, And a lot of people ask me about driving the rapist home. And it's always been a rule in gangland, urban centers of New York. I remember New York in the 70s, actually, as well as in the Southwest. You always leave one person alive to tell the tale.